Hello and welcome to another episode of the PBB podcast. And we are so, can you say that 3 times fast? We are so excited today to have another round of wonderful guests. My name is Shelley Smith, one of your co-hosts, owner Premier Rapport, and here honoring the Penn-Sherm local chapter. And of course, we have Bob McKenna, who's president of the chamber. So Bob, why don't you introduce our guest today?
Good morning. Am I on?
You are.
Can you hear me? All right.
Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Bob McKenna. I'm the president of the Virginia Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. And this, as Shelley already said, is a new episode of PBB, and that does not stand for Peanut Butter and Business. It stands for Peninsula Biz Buzz. And it's the new Peninsula Chamber podcast. And with us today are my friends Craig Quigley and Rick Dwyer from HRMFFA. And for those of you who are uninitiated into what HRMFFA means, it is the Hampton Roads Military and Federal Facilities Alliance. So guys, have you ever considered just going with the Alliance, or is that already taken? I think that's already taken.
I think the Economic Development Alliance uses the Alliance, so it's taken, I believe, Bob.
Just recently. So speaking of that, we're going to try to get Doug Smith on an upcoming episode to talk about the Alliance. But I consider you guys the Alliance because I'm a retired Navy, and 40% of our economy is defense contract based. So that's why HRMFFA is here, really. I mean, that's part of the reason that HRMFFA is here, and it's certainly the reason that we asked them to be on one of these early episodes. Yeah. So without any further introduction, I'm going to go over to Shelley for the first question. Go ahead, Shelley.
All right. So Craig and or Rick, however you guys want to kind of go in, why don't you tell us a little bit more about how you got started and why you got started and what your focus is, and then we can dive into a deeper conversation. So whoever wants to go first.
You want to take it?
I can, sure. So let's see. So HRMFFA began back in 2006, following the last round of BRAC, or Base Realignment and Closure. And it was really born out of the fact that Oceana Naval Air Station came out on the initial list in 2005. Issue was encroachment. There was just too much development and building going on around the air station there in Virginia Beach, as well as out the outlying field in Chesapeake. And it was hampering the training for the Navy's pilots. So a lot of promises were made by both the city of Chesapeake and Virginia Beach and the state of Virginia to roll back that encroachment. They were going to buy up, do rezoning, buy up the properties from willing sellers, and then rezone it to reduce the development around the installations. So fast forward a little bit, Oceana comes off the list. And then in 2006, the elected officials, kind of after all the dust settled, said, how did that happen? How do we get caught so flat-footed that one of our major economic drivers here was about to be closed and we didn't really realize it? And they determined that there was no organization whose full-time job was to pay attention to the federal sector. As Bob mentioned, the military alone is about 42% of the regional economy, and if you add in the NASA Langley Research Center, Jefferson Lab, and several of the other large federal installations in the region, it's another 3-4%. So about roughly 45% of the regional economy is based on the federal sector. And they said, we need somebody that pays attention to that sector full time. So they created HRMFFA, and the 13 elected officials from the 10 cities and 3 counties that HRMFFA represents. They make up about half our board of directors. The other half are private sector businesses that have an interest in the federal sector, as well as people like Bob McKenna, the Peninsula Chamber, and Brian Stevens on the south side, and now the Williamsburg Chamber has also joined as an ex officio member of the board. And our mission is simple: it's to attract, retain, and grow the federal presence here in Hampton Roads.
Okay. Craig, can you tell us maybe one of your biggest successes? And then I know that Bob will pipe in on that answer as well, but maybe some of the biggest things you guys have done since conception.
I'll give you an older example and a recent example for 2 of them. One, there was a very concerted effort by the Florida delegation to move a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier from Hampton Roads to Mayport, Florida. And this is going back now 2007, 2008. Before I got here, before Rick got here, it was our predecessor. And HRMFFA led the charge to oppose that move and ultimately rallied the congressional delegation, the Commonwealth, and stopped that movement in its tracks. And today, all of the Navy's East Coast aircraft carriers are home ported in Hampton Roads. And it's our intent to have them stay here in perpetuity. So that's one from a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
A recent one involves the Air Force's F-22 Formal Training Unit, which had been stationed at Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida. And if you recall, Shelley, last fall, that base just got whacked by a hurricane, virtually destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the aircraft were moved to various locations, but the decision was made to repurpose the base to put a different type of aircraft there and rebuild it as a base of the future. So where do I put the Formal Training Unit, which trains pilots and maintainers and is something in the neighborhood of 800 airmen and 30-some airframes? Where do I put them? And ultimately, we worked hard to get the answer to that question, Langley Air Force Base in Hampton.
Mm-hmm.
And we were successful. And that is a recent one that we'll watch carefully. It isn't over until the first units arrive, but we're very happy to see that. And it's a big shot in the arm for Langley and the Peninsula.
No, those are both huge. Bob, over to you.
So, okay, so Craig, you brought up two things that most people, I think, in the public don't typically think about when they think economic impact. Well, most don't think about economic impact except for how it impacts their personal life, but the presence of one carrier in the Hampton Roads area is a huge economic impact, and it spans many facets. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, the maintenance contracts alone are in the category of hundreds of millions of dollars. The midlife refueling of an aircraft carrier is done at Newport News Shipbuilding. That is about a 4-year project and about $4 billion. So the impact of ship maintenance is huge, of all types, but there's none bigger than the aircraft carrier, to be sure. Now you have the sailors that are a part of the crew of that ship, and they own homes or they rent apartments, they buy cars, they eat in our restaurants. And again, the economic impact of that is huge, not only of the ship's crew, but of the air wing that most of it flies right out of Oceana or Chambers Field on the Norfolk Naval Station. And again, those aviators live somewhere. They eat in our restaurants, they buy cars, and the economic impact is enormous. That's why Florida wanted them in the first place.
Right.
And that's why we work so hard to keep them right here.
Okay, so one other thing that you said, Craig, kind of struck me, because I thought you were the one and only plank owner, the commissioning CEO, so to speak, of HRMFFA, but you had a predecessor there. I didn't realize that. So how many years in did you show up?
My predecessor came on board when HRMFFA was formed in 2006, and then he left in the fall of 2010, and that's when I came on board. And so I've been here in 9 years, as a matter of fact, last month, 9 years in September.
And you were pretty much, well, you were a one-man show for about 5 or 6 years until Rick showed up, right?
I was. At one point in time in its early life, between 2006 and 2010, HRMFFA had 4 employees. But when I was hired, the interviewers made it very clear to me that we were going to be a universe of one. And I said, okay, I'm okay with that. And then I have to give all the credit to former Norfolk Mayor Paul Frame, who made the case for adding a second person. And Rick came on board 3 years ago, and quite literally, we can do twice as much as we did when I was alone, and attend different events, divide and conquer. Rick and I are always commenting on that. and it's been a tremendous advantage. I think 2 is the right number. 4's too many, probably. 1 was just not enough. 2 is just right.
So as Vern Clark said, famously said, quantity has a quality all of its own, right?
Yes, I would agree to that.
Yeah, so you can cover the peninsula and the south side, for instance, in the same day. So that's great. So you talk about what a typical, go ahead.
It's amazing how often on any given day there are 2 events that really we should attend that are held at exactly the same time or within 30 minutes of each other, and yet it's an hour drive apart. And so by having 2 of us, Rick can do one, I can do the other, and it's a huge improvement.
Yeah, so I'm living that conundrum right now. So yeah.
Morning, it's a morning, noon, and night, 7-day a week possibility of.
I can feel your old pain, Craig, and I think 2 is the right number. So 2 of you, 2 of me, that would be about perfect. So can you give us an idea of what a typical week looks like? So say you're both splitting apart. What are you both doing to impact the military and federal facilities on the peninsula and on the south side?
Let me start, and I'll throw it over to you. We spend a lot of time in the seats of our cars, and going from an event or a meeting with a federal installation leader. Maybe it's on the phone, maybe it's by email, but there's no substitute for face-to-face. There are also a variety of meetings, many of which are championed by your chamber or by the Southside Chamber, that really demand our presence to be a part of the conversation, to take a position on policies that affect the region, particularly the federal sector, which is our swim lane. And Rick and I will attend this one. Rick will attend that one. I will attend this one, and we'll mix it up and cover meetings with installation leaders, meetings with our own board members, communication with our board members. There are no 2 days that are ever alike, I don't think.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say that you engage in the legislative arena at the local, state, and federal level on a regular basis?
Certainly, yeah. Like I said, the elected officials here in the region make up our board of directors, so we're obviously in contact with them quite a bit. We hold our board meetings once a quarter, where we provide them updates on the things we're doing. We bring our consultants down from DC and kind of give them a deep dive on what's going on in DC. These last couple of years, we've gotten more involved, I think, with the General Assembly, because there's been some quite frankly, some state issues that have affected the federal installations of the region. But we spend probably our lion's share of the time working with the congressional delegation, because that's obviously
we're always thinking about what affects the federal installations, and if there is something that we can do that is having an adverse effect on them carrying out their mission, whatever that mission might be, or it's suboptimal in some way. If there's any action we can take at the local, state, or federal level to help facilitate and remove that barrier, that we do everything humanly possible to do just that. There might be another round of BRAC at some point in the future. I suspect there will be. It may not be called that, but it will be some sort of an effort to consolidate the shore infrastructure of the Defense Department. And we want there to be no reason whatsoever for any of the parent services to have a desire to close any of the Hampton Roads installations, because they're all carrying out their missions as efficiently as they possibly can. Sometimes that goes into unusual areas like energy, for instance. Wind energy, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, all of those bear a direct effect on the viability and the resilience, particularly of military installations in the region. So we take positions in support of those programs if it is beneficial to the installations to do so.
And if it intersects with the local community, really, and that's where the rubber meets the road with you guys, right? Federal facilities intersecting with local community and economic impact. So
yeah, you're absolutely right, Bob. And some of those things, we get involved with things that might not be exactly right, down our swim lane or our mission, such as veterans transition or workforce development. I mean, obviously that's a big issue here locally. And veterans transition, you'd say, well, what's that have to do with attracting, retaining, and growing federal facilities? Well, if because of the quality of life or because of prospective employment opportunities after service members serve their commitments and their time, keeps them here in the region, well, then we want to support that as well.
And the same is true for spouse employment as well, Bob. That is come through loud and clear from the Secretary of Defense. All three of the military departments secretaries have made that a priority. Not only just the transitioning service member, as Rick said, but the spouse as well. So make it as easy and productive for a military spouse to get a license, to continue earning that paycheck for their household as we possibly can.
And the Commonwealth has jumped in with both feet on that issue too, just recently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Over to you, Shelley.
I was going to just ask a little bit more deeper dive into what you were just talking about, but from the board perspective. Can you talk a little bit about the board members and maybe what's top of mind for them? I know you said you meet quarterly, but you also have ongoing conversations, it sounds like, with some of them on the weekly. Is there anything that's top of mind that you can share with the viewers or the listeners related to the workforce development piece, keeping people in, spouses, or simply something else that they're having you focus in on, or how they're supporting you?
Sea level rise certainly comes to mind. There was a joint land use study, actually several of them, that are either recently completed or about to begin that have a focus on sea level rise. These are the first in the nation to be done. And much has been said and written about the subsidence of the land in Hampton Roads coupled with rising seas and how that is a real problem for any piece of our geography in Hampton Roads that touches the water. And there's a lot of that is federal installations. So how do we work that together in concert with the municipalities, academia, the federal installations, the business community, because we're all in this together and the water doesn't care who owns the property. So we need to develop a holistic solution, and I think we are on a very good path to work collaboratively to do just that.
So when I hear you talk about collaboration, Craig, I mean, it strikes me because I think HRMFFA and HRPDC are probably two of the best examples of collaborative efforts right now in our community. And we have people talking about how it's very important to act regionally on a number of issues. So I think that's great, and you guys really are doing a great job. How many localities or municipalities are involved in HRMFFA?
13.
13, okay.
Cities and 3 counties, going all the way from Williamsburg and James City County on the peninsula out to Franklin and down to Chesapeake and Virginia Beach.
So really encompassing almost all of Hampton Roads, what is known as Hampton Roads.
Yes, absolutely.
And how easy or difficult is it to get them all pulling in the same direction?
They all have a very clear understanding, even if they don't host a federal installation. So I'll give you an example of Isle of Wight County or Franklin or Poquoson. They don't actually host a federal facility within their borders, but they have federal employees that live there and then commute to a place of work. So the impact of the federal installations is pervasive throughout the region, and they understand that, and they want to play an active role in HRMFFA, and they realize they're all in this together, And so it really is a joy to see the elected leaders, the business leaders, the academic leaders on our board all pull together on issues that affect them all.
Excellent.
Well,
Shelley.
gentlemen, I think it's time for us to put a wrap on today's conversation. So are there any final comments from either yourself, Rick, or Craig? And then I'll pitch it over to Bob for a final comment. Anything else that we need to know that we didn't ask you today?
No.
Air Force Think Navy. What you need to know. That's all anybody really needs to know.
Okay,
Oh my gosh.
So that
All the time.
that's a wonderful
You think
segue.
I learn?
Oh no, Bob's going to get his stuff.
That's a wonderful segue. And, I know that Rick is a Mike and Mike fan, or ESPN radio fan, and Mike Golick and Mike Greenberg always used to make very creative bets when there were big games coming up. So tell me, Rick and Craig, what's on the line on this weekend's game, bet-wise between the two of you?
We honestly don't have one yet. I don't know.
Well, let's do it
have a
right here.
But I will tell you that next Monday morning, one of us is going to have a much better morning than the other one.
Yeah. I hear you loud and clear. Now, see, the Merchant Marine Academy, our main rivalry is the Coast Guard Academy. So maybe the PBB that I do the week before that will have to be with Tim Hammond up at the Coast Guard base or something like that.
Yeah.
Excellent choice. Excellent.
And we will come up with creative bet, believe me. So in closing, I'd like to say this, I think that from the Chamber's perspective, this is one of our most important partnerships. And I appreciate the fact Craig is on our board here. Rick is on the Public Policy Committee. They both show up for the Military Affairs Council meetings that we have the third Wednesday of each month. And I'm on the HRMFFA board ex officio. But I really appreciate the partnership, and I look forward to continued and expanded reasons to work together. So thanks very much, guys, and I'm glad the audio worked well today. I think so. We'll get this posted sometime tomorrow, probably. So thanks again.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks,
See you soon.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.